Hi guys, sorry to interrupt your viewing, but please subscribe to the channel and like this video. Thank you.
I never thought the person I trusted most would betray me like this. My mom, my own mom, let my ex, who I had a restraining order against, take my kids without telling me. And that's not even the worst part. When I first asked my mom to babysit my kids, it felt like the most natural decision in the world. She's grandma, and my kids adore her. They light up when they see her, and she dotes on them like only a grandmother can. Life as a single mom isn't easy, and with my job demanding long hours, I needed someone I could trust to look after Max and Ellie while I stayed late at work. My mom had always been my go-to in moments like these. She knew their routines, their favorite snacks, and how to handle their bedtime antics. That evening, I dropped the kids off at her house around 6. My mom greeted us at the door with her usual warm smile, arms outstretched as Ellie ran straight into her hug. "Grandma," Ellie squealed, already tugging at her hand to show her the stuffed bunny she insisted on bringing everywhere. Max followed behind with his backpack stuffed with Legos, announcing that he had a big project to show Grandma later. My mom chuckled, patting his head, and ushered them inside. I gave her a quick rundown of their bedtime routines, reminded her about Ellie's favorite blanket and Max's aversion to green vegetables, and promised I'd be back by 10. My mom waved me off with her usual confidence. "Don't you worry about a thing. We're going to have a great time, aren't we, kiddos?" she said as Ellie giggled and Max nodded enthusiastically. As I drove away, I felt a sense of relief. The kids were in good hands, and for the first time all day, I could focus on work without the usual guilt gnawing at me. Everything seemed normal throughout the evening. Around 8, my mom texted me a photo of the kids snuggled on the couch, watching a movie. Ellie looked half asleep, her head resting on Max's shoulder, and Max had his typical laser focus on the screen. They looked happy and safe, and seeing them like that put me at ease. I sent her a quick text back. "Thanks, Mom. I'll be there soon." She didn't reply, but I figured she was busy getting them ready for bed. It was a little after 10 when I pulled into her driveway. The house was lit up, and everything seemed calm. I pictured the kids already asleep upstairs, their faces tucked into pillows while my mom tidied up or waited for me with one of her herbal teas. But as soon as I stepped inside, something felt off. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Usually, I'd hear some faint TV noise, Ellie talking in her sleep, or the hum of my mom's voice as she chatted with me about her evening with the kids. Instead, the house felt eerily still. My mom appeared from the kitchen with a dish towel in her hand, smiling nervously. "Oh, you're here," she said, her voice a little too cheerful. I glanced around the living room. The couch was empty, but Ellie's stuffed bunny was lying in the corner, and the popcorn bowls from earlier were still sitting on the coffee table. "Where are the kids?" I asked, already feeling a knot forming in my stomach. "They're upstairs sleeping," she replied quickly, her eyes darting toward the staircase. Her tone felt off, but I told myself I was overthinking it. I headed upstairs, calling out softly, "Max? Ellie?" The guest room, where they always slept, was empty. The bed was neatly made, untouched. I opened the closet, checked the bathroom, even peeked into the hall closet, though I knew it didn't make sense. The kids weren't there. My chest tightened, and a wave of panic hit me like ice water. I stormed back downstairs, my voice trembling. "Mom, where are they?" "They're not upstairs." Her face changed. She looked like a kid caught sneaking cookies from the jar, guilt written all over her. "Oh, they're not here right now," she stammered. My heart dropped. "What do you mean they're not here?" I demanded. She hesitated, wringing the dish towel in her hands like she could twist her way out of the truth. They're with your ex," she finally said, barely meeting my eyes. Her words hit me like a slap. "What?" I shouted, my voice shaking with disbelief. "What do you mean they're with my ex? He's not supposed to be anywhere near them." She took a step back, her face pale. "He came by earlier," she explained, her words rushed and defensive. "He wanted to see the kids. He said he missed them. He's their father, honey. I didn't think it was a big deal. I let him take them for a little while. I thought you'd be okay with it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My ex and I had been divorced for over a year, and it had been a nightmare. He wasn't just difficult. He was dangerous. Things had gotten so bad that I'd filed a restraining order against him to protect myself and the kids. My mom knew all of this. She'd been there when I broke down after the court hearings, when I changed the locks on my doors, and when I told her I couldn't live in fear anymore. "You let him take them?" I repeated, my voice rising. "Are you out of your mind, Mom? He's not allowed near them. How could you do this?" She looked at me like I was the unreasonable one. "He's their father," she said softly, as if that justified everything. He just wanted to spend some time with them. I thought it would be okay. I didn't even know how to respond. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and called my ex. It went straight to voicemail. I tried again and again, but each time, the call disconnected without an answer. Where did he take them? I demanded, barely able to keep my voice steady. I don't know, she admitted. He said he'd bring them back before you got here. I don't understand why he hasn't yet. The room felt like it was spinning. My mom, the one person I thought I could trust unconditionally, had let my kids go with a man I'd worked so hard to protect them from. I stared at her, trying to make sense of how this could have happened. But there was no time for that. My kids were gone, and I had no idea where to start looking. I stood there, frozen, my mom's words echoing in my head like a blaring alarm. They're with your ex. He came to see them, and I let him take them for a little while. My heart dropped into my stomach, and the world felt like it was tilting sideways. What do you mean you let him take them? I finally managed to say, my voice sharp and trembling. You knew he wasn't supposed to be near them. Mom, you knew about the restraining order. She winced but didn't meet my gaze. He said he just wanted to see them, she muttered, as if that made everything okay. He's their father, and he missed them. I didn't think it was a big deal. A big deal, I repeated, my voice rising as panic and fury swirled together in my chest. He's dangerous, Mom. How could you do this? She tried to explain, her words tumbling out in a mess of excuses. He seemed fine, really. He wasn't angry or anything. He just wanted to spend some time with them. He promised he'd bring them back before you got here. I felt like I was going to be sick. Where did he take them? I asked, desperation thick in my voice. I don't know, she admitted, finally looking at me. Her face was pale, her eyes wide with something that might have been guilt or fear. He didn't say. I thought he'd just take them to the park or something. I didn't think. You didn't think? I cut her off, my voice shaking with anger. You didn't think about the restraining order? About why I had to get it in the first place? Mom, you've seen what he's capable of. How could you just let him take them without even calling me? Her hands twisted the dish towel she was holding into a tight knot. I thought it would be fine, she whispered, but even she didn't sound convinced anymore. I didn't have time to keep arguing with her. My kids were out there, and I had no idea where or with who. I grabbed my phone and dialed my ex's number again. It rang twice before going to voicemail. I tried again. Same result. My hands were shaking so badly, I almost dropped the phone. Mom, I said, my voice low and urgent. Think. Did he say anything about where he was going? No, she said softly. He didn't. I just assumed. I didn't let her finish. I turned on my heel and headed for the door. I'm going to find them, I said, though I had no idea where to even start. I drove aimlessly for what felt like hours, my thoughts racing faster than the car. Where could he have taken them? A park? A restaurant? His apartment? I hadn't been there since we separated, and the thought of him bringing them into that place, where so many of our fights had spiraled out of control, made my skin crawl. I pulled over to the side of the road and called the police. My voice cracked as I explained the situation, my words tumbling out in a rush. I have a restraining order against him. He's not supposed to have contact with me or the kids. My mom, she let him take them without telling me. I don't know where they are. The dispatcher asked me a series of questions. His name, his description, his car, where he might go. I answered as best I could, my heart pounding in my chest. She assured me they'd send officers to check his known addresses and promised to update me as soon as they knew anything. Hanging up the phone, I felt a mix of relief and helplessness. I'd done what I could, but it didn't feel like enough. My kids were out there, and every second they were with him felt like a lifetime. I called my mom again. She picked up on the first ring, her voice tentative. Did you find them? No, I said sharply. The police are looking, but I need you to tell me everything he said when he came to the house. Every word. Did he mention anything about where he was going, what he planned to do? She hesitated, and I could hear the sound of her pacing on the other end of the line. He didn't say much, she said finally. Just that he missed the kids and wanted to spend some time with them. He said you've been so stressed lately, and he thought this might take some pressure off you. Her words hit me like another blow. He said that? I asked, my voice shaking. Yes, she admitted. And honey, I didn't want to tell you this, but he said you've been struggling. That maybe the kids would be better off spending more time with him. I gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. And you believed him? I asked, my voice breaking. After everything I've told you, everything you've seen, how could you believe him? I just thought he might have changed, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. People can change, can't they? I didn't answer. I couldn't. Every word she said felt like a betrayal, like a knife twisting deeper. The hours dragged on. I drove to every park, every restaurant, every spot I could think of where he might have taken them. With each place I checked, my hope dwindled a little more. My phone buzzed constantly, calls from the police, from my mom, from friends I'd reached out to in a panic. Each time, the answer was the same: nothing. By the time midnight rolled around, I found myself parked outside his apartment. The lights were off, and the building was silent. I sat there, staring at the dark windows, my hands trembling in my lap. Were they in there? Were they okay? I couldn't just sit there and do nothing, but I also couldn't barge in. I needed to wait for the police. I leaned my head against the steering wheel, tears streaming down my face. I thought about Max, who always tried so hard to be brave, and Ellie, who clung to her stuffed bunny whenever she felt scared. Were they wondering where I was? Were they asking for me? I stayed there all night, waiting for any sign of movement, any clue that my kids were safe. But as the hours dragged on, the silence felt more suffocating. I'd never felt so powerless in my entire life. The words hung in the air like a bomb that had just exploded. He's their father. He has a right to see them. My mom's voice was calm, almost defiant, like she didn't understand the weight of what she'd done. Are you kidding me right now? I shouted, my voice cracking under the weight of my emotions. He doesn't have a right to anything. He's not allowed near me, let alone the kids. Do you have any idea what you've done? She flinched at my tone, but stood her ground. He's their father, she repeated, as if saying it again would make it make sense. He just wanted to spend time with them. I thought it was the right thing to do. I didn't think he'd. You didn't think, Mom? That's the problem. I cut her off, my chest tightening with rage and fear. Do you even remember why I had to get a restraining order in the first place? Have you forgotten all the threats, the screaming, the way he used to act around the kids? Do you not remember me calling you at 2 a.m, crying, because I was scared he'd show up at the house? Her expression wavered, a flicker of guilt crossing her face, but she still wouldn't look me in the eye. That was a long time ago, she mumbled. People change. Maybe he's trying to be a better person. Maybe this is his way of what? I snapped. Making amends? Proving he's a good father? Because taking my kids without my permission is not how you do that. I could feel my voice rising, but I didn't care. The panic was overwhelming now, clawing at my chest like a living thing. My kids were out there with a man who had spent years making my life a nightmare, and the one person I thought I could trust had handed them over to him on a silver platter. I turned away from her, pulling out my phone. My hands were shaking so badly that it took 3 tries to dial his number. It rang once, twice, 3 times before going to voicemail. It's me, I said, my voice trembling as I tried to keep it together. Call me back. Where are you? Where are the kids? You have no right to take them. Bring them back now. I hung up and immediately dialed again, but the call went straight to voicemail. Pick up the phone. I shouted into the empty line before hanging up. My mom watched me, her face pale, but I couldn't even look at her. I tried again, this time calling his sister. She answered on the second ring. Have you seen him? I asked, skipping any pleasantries. Has he been to your house? Do you know where he is? No, she said, sounding confused. I haven't talked to him in weeks. What's going on? He took the kids, I said, my voice cracking. My mom let him take them, and now I can't find them. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. I'll call him, she said finally. I'll see if I can get in touch with him. I hung up without saying goodbye and turned back to my mom. Do you have any idea where he might have gone? I demanded. She shook her head, her hands twisting the dish towel she still held. I don't know. I thought he'd just take them to the park, or maybe for ice cream. He said he'd bring them back before you got here. And you believed him? I shot back, my voice thick with disbelief. After everything he's done, you believed he'd just what? Play the role of the doting father, and then hand them back without a fight. My mom didn't answer. She just stood there, looking small and uncertain. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I couldn't recognize her. I stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind me. My mind was racing, a million thoughts colliding all at once. Where could he have taken them? Was he trying to scare me? Or worse, was he planning something more sinister? I got in the car and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I needed to think, to focus, but the fear was suffocating. My hands were trembling as I dialed the police. The dispatcher answered almost immediately. My kids are missing, I said, my words tumbling out in a rush. Their father took them without my permission, and there's a restraining order in place. He's not supposed to have contact with them. The dispatcher asked me for details. his name, a description of his car, what the kids were wearing. I answered as best I could, though my voice shook with every word. I don't know where he might have gone, I admitted, my stomach twisting with guilt. I've been calling him, but he won't answer. We'll send an officer to your location, she said, and we'll put out an alert to patrol units in the area. Stay where you are and wait for the officer to arrive. I hung up and dropped the phone into my lap, staring out the windshield as tears blurred my vision. I should have done more. I should have known something like this could happen. When the officer arrived, I told him everything. About the restraining order, about my mom's decision to let him take the kids, about my failed attempts to reach him. He took notes, his face serious, and assured me they would do everything they could to locate them. You did the right thing by calling us, he said, his tone calm but firm. We'll start by checking the places he's most likely to go. Do you know any addresses where he might be staying? I gave him the addresses I could remember, his old apartment, his sister's house, a friend's place I thought he might still be in touch with. Each one felt like a desperate shot in the dark. As the officer left to follow up on the leads, I sat in my car, staring at the empty street. My mind raced with worst-case scenarios, each one more terrifying than the last. Every minute that passed felt like an eternity, and the thought of my kids being out there with him, alone, scared, made my chest ache. I didn't know how I was going to get through this. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to stop until I brought my kids home. The roads blurred beneath the glow of streetlights as I drove aimlessly through the city, my mind racing with fear and frustration. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, as I fought to stay calm. I had no plan, no concrete leads, just a list of places he might have taken them. Parks, restaurants, his sister's house. Each one was a shot in the dark, but I had to try. The kids were out there somewhere, and I wasn't going to stop until I found them. I called his sister first. She'd been supportive after our divorce, always saying she understood why I had to leave him, but tonight her tone was different. I told you already, I haven't seen him, she said, her voice curt. I don't even know where he's living now. He keeps to himself these days. You'd tell me if you knew anything, right? I asked, the desperation clear in my voice. Please, I just need to know the kids are okay. There was a long pause. Of course, I would, she said, but there was something hesitant about the way she said it. But I really don't know anything. I hope you find them. I hung up and stared at my phone, willing it to ring with a call or text from someone who could help. But it stayed silent. I tried the parks next, driving through the familiar spots where he used to take the kids during our short-lived periods of calm. The first park was empty, save for a stray dog sniffing around a trash can. The second one had a few teenagers hanging out near the swings, but no sign of my kids. By the third park, I was starting to lose hope. My mom called, her voice trembling. Any luck? She asked. No, I snapped, my patience wearing thin. And you're sure he didn't tell you where he was going? I already told you. I thought he'd just take them for a little bit, she said, her tone defensive. I didn't think he'd keep them this long. Her nonchalance was like a slap in the face. You didn't think, Mom? That's the problem. I shouted, my voice cracking. If anything happens to them, it's on you. Do you even realize that? There was silence on the other end, and then a soft, I'm sorry. Sorry wasn't going to bring my kids back. Eventually, I called the police again. My first call earlier had been brief, just enough to get an alert out to patrol units. This time, I stayed on the line longer, going over every detail I could think of about his habits and possible locations. Explaining the situation felt humiliating, like admitting to a stranger just how much I had failed to protect my kids. How do you say out loud that your own mother let them go with someone dangerous, someone you've spent years shielding them from? But the officer was professional, asking questions calmly and methodically. You're doing the right thing by keeping us informed, she said. We have units checking his known addresses. Do you have any recent photos of the kids that you can send us? I fumbled with my phone, scrolling through my gallery with shaking fingers. I found a picture from just a week ago. Max with his gap-toothed grin, holding up a Lego creation he was proud of, and Ellie clutching her stuffed bunny as if it were her lifeline. I sent it to them with a note that made my stomach turn. Missing since this evening. Taken by their father. Stay by your phone, the officer said. If he contacts you, let us know immediately. I thanked her and hung up, but my hands were still trembling. The gravity of the situation was suffocating. My kids were out there, and I had no idea if they were safe. By midnight, I found myself parked outside his old apartment. The building was dark, its windows blank and unwelcoming. I hadn't been there since before the divorce, but the memories came flooding back. The shouting, the slamming doors, the way he'd make me feel like I was losing my mind. It had been our battleground, and the thought of my kids being inside the place made my chest tighten. I stayed in the car, my eyes fixed on the building. I scanned the windows for any sign of movement, the faintest flicker of light, but there was nothing. Still, I couldn't bring myself to leave. Something about this place felt important, like if I stayed long enough, I'd find them. The hours crept by. I called his phone again, leaving another voicemail that was half plea, half demand. Just bring them back. Please. We could figure this out, but I need to know they're okay. I even considered going up to knock on the door, but I knew I couldn't. If he was there, if the kids were there, it could escalate into something worse. I needed to wait for the police. The minutes felt like hours, each one stretching longer than the last. I thought about Max, who always tried so hard to be brave, and Ellie, who would be clutching her bunny and asking for me. Were they scared? Did they think I'd abandoned them? The thought was unbearable. My phone buzzed, and I snatched it up, hoping it was the police or someone with information. But it was my mom again. I didn't want to answer, but I couldn't stop myself. Where are you now? She asked hesitantly. Outside his old apartment, I said flatly. Do you think they're there? I don't know, I admitted, but I don't know where else to go. She sighed. Honey, I know you're angry with me, and I know I messed up, but I really believed he just wanted to see them. He said you've been so overwhelmed lately, and I thought maybe... Stop, I cut her off. Don't justify what you did. Just don't. There was a long pause. I'll keep praying, she said softly. I hung up without responding. Praying wasn't going to bring them back. The night dragged on, each passing moment chipping away at my hope. The darkness felt endless, and every shadow seemed to taunt me with what I didn't know. My kids were out there somewhere, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I was running out of time. The night stretched into the early hours of morning, every passing minute scraping away at my sanity. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. The darkness outside his old apartment felt alive, pressing against me like an unseen weight, and every small noise, a car passing in the distance, the rustle of a tree branch, set my nerves on edge. My body was exhausted, but my mind refused to shut down. I kept my eyes locked on the building, watching the windows, the doors, any sign of movement. My phone sat on the passenger seat, its screen dark except for the occasional buzz of a useless notification. I didn't hear from the police, my mom, or my ex. The silence was deafening, amplifying my fears until they felt like they were swallowing me whole. Just after dawn, when the sky began to lighten and the world outside started to stir, I spotted it. His car. It was unmistakable, an old sedan with a dented rear bumper and a rust patch on the driver's door. It turned into the lot slowly, its engine humming softly in the morning quiet. My heart leapt into my throat as I sat up straight, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my fingers ached. I watched as he parked, stepping out casually, as if nothing was wrong. My breath caught when I saw he was holding Ellie in his arms. She looked tired, her face pressed against his shoulder, clutching her stuffed bunny tightly. I didn't think. I didn't plan. I just acted. I threw open my car door and bolted across the lot. Hey! I shouted, my voice shaking but loud enough to catch his attention. What the hell do you think you're doing? Give me my kids! He turned, startled, but not in the way I expected. There was no guilt on his face, no sign that he knew he'd done something wrong. Instead, he looked genuinely confused. What are you doing here? He asked, his tone casual, almost annoyed. What am I doing here? I spat, my voice rising. What are you doing with my daughter? You're not supposed to be anywhere near them. Ellie stirred in his arms, her little face scrunching up as she turned to look at me. Mommy, she said groggily, her voice barely a whisper. I reached out instinctively. Give her to me. Right now. He hesitated, his brow furrowing. Your mom said you knew, he said, as if that explained everything. She told me you were fine with this. I froze, my brain struggling to process what he'd just said. What? She said you were okay with it, he repeated, his tone almost defensive now. That you've been overwhelmed lately and needed a break. She thought it'd be good for the kids to spend some time with me. I stared at him, my chest tightening. My mom had lied. To him? She'd made it sound like I was fine with this, like I'd approved it. The betrayal hit me like a freight train, but I couldn't let myself focus on that now. I had to get my kids away from him. I reached out again, this time with more force. I don't care what my mom said. Give me my daughter. Now. He looked like he was going to argue, but something in my expression must have stopped him. He handed Ellie over reluctantly, muttering under his breath. She clung to me immediately, burying her face in my neck. I scanned the car, my heart pounding. Where's Max? I demanded. He's inside, he said, jerking his head toward the building. We just got back. He fell asleep in the car, so I carried him in first. I didn't wait for him to say anything else. Holding Ellie tightly, I pushed past him and headed for the building. He followed, his tone shifting from defensive to confused. What's your problem? I didn't do anything wrong. I just wanted to spend time with them. I spun around at the door, fury burning in my chest. What's my problem? Are you serious? You took my kids without my permission. There's a restraining order against you. You have no right to be near them. He raised his hands in mock surrender. Your mom said you were fine with it, he said again, as if that absolved him of everything. She said you've been struggling to take care of them. She said they'd be better off with me. His words stopped me cold. What did you just say? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. She said you've been overwhelmed. He repeated, his tone matter of fact. That you've been having a hard time keeping up with everything. She thought I could help out. I couldn't breathe. My mind flashed back to every conversation I'd had with my mom over the past few weeks. The complaints about work, the stress of being a single parent, the nights when I called her crying because I felt like I was failing. Had she taken those moments of vulnerability and twisted them into some justification for this? Listen, he continued, oblivious to my inner turmoil. I'm not trying to start anything. I just wanted to spend time with my kids. Your mom thought it was a good idea, and I agreed. That's all. That's all. I repeated, my voice trembling with rage. Do you even realize what you've done? You violated a court order. You've put me through hell. And you think you can just say, that's all, like it's no big deal? He looked like he was about to respond, but I didn't give him the chance. I pulled out my phone and dialed the police, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. You're going to explain this to them, I said, my voice cold. The police arrived quickly, and everything after that was a blur. They questioned him, took statements, and eventually allowed me to leave with my kids. Max was groggy but unharmed, and Ellie clung to me like her life depended on it. I didn't look at my ex as we left. I didn't care what he had to say or how he tried to justify his actions. All I could think about was getting my kids home and figuring out what the hell I was going to do about my mom. Her betrayal stung worse than anything he'd done. She was supposed to protect us, to be the one person I could count on. But she'd handed my kids over to the man I'd spent years trying to shield them from, all because she thought she knew better. As I drove away, Ellie finally loosened her grip on me, her small voice breaking the silence. I missed you, Mommy, she whispered. Tears blurred my vision, but I managed to smile at her through the rearview mirror. I missed you too, baby, I said softly. And in that moment, I made a silent promise to myself. I'd never let this happen again. Not with him, and not with her. Hearing those words from my ex, your mom said you've been struggling to take care of them, felt like someone had driven a knife into my back and twisted it. It wasn't just the betrayal of letting him take the kids. It was the story she had spun to justify it. A version of me that wasn't just overwhelmed, but unfit. I felt sick. My mother, the person I had always leaned on, had painted me as incapable. I thought back to all the times I'd vented to her about work stress, the nights I'd called her in tears because I felt like I couldn't do it all on my own. She must have taken every vulnerable moment I'd shared and twisted it into something that suited her narrative. I tried to push the thought away as I opened the back door of his car. Max was curled up in the back seat, still asleep, his face soft and peaceful. It was a small mercy that he didn't seem to know what had been going on. I gently shook him awake. Mom, he mumbled groggily, rubbing his eyes. Yeah, baby, I said, forcing a smile. We're going home now. I picked him up, balancing him on my hip while Ellie clung to my other side, her bunny still gripped tightly in her small hands. I didn't look at my ex as I carried them both to my car. He didn't say anything, just stood there with his hands shoved into his pockets, watching us leave. As soon as the kids were buckled in and I'd closed the car door, I called the police. My hands were trembling as I explained that I had found them. They're safe now, I said, relief washing over me even as my anger simmered just below the surface. The dispatcher asked me to stay where I was until an officer arrived to take my statement. I agreed, leaning against the car and trying to keep my breathing steady. Ellie and Max were quiet in the back seat, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. When the officer pulled into the lot, I waved him over. He was calm and professional, but his eyes softened when he saw the kids. They're okay? He asked. I nodded. They're fine, I said, though the words felt hollow. They might have been physically unharmed, but the emotional toll of this night would take a long time to heal. The officer took notes as I recounted everything, from the moment I dropped them off at my mom's house to finding my ex in the parking lot. I told him about the restraining order, about my mom's role in all of this, and about the lies she had told to both me and my ex. When I finished, the officer frowned. It sounds like your ex believed this was all arranged, he said. He did, I admitted, my voice tinged with bitterness. He said my mom told him I'd agreed to it. She made it seem like I wanted this to happen. The officer sighed, jotting something down in his notebook. Well, you have your kids now, and that's the most important thing. But I'd strongly recommend filing a report against your mother. She knowingly facilitated a violation of the restraining order and put your children at risk. His words hit me like a slap. A report against my mom? It felt so final, so wrong. She's my mom. She'd made a terrible mistake. One that I was still furious about, but she wasn't a stranger or an enemy. She was family. I don't know, I said hesitantly. I mean, she screwed up, but I don't think she realized how serious this was. She thought she was helping. Helping or not, she endangered your kids, the officer said firmly. This isn't something to take lightly. Even if you don't press charges, documenting what happened could be crucial if something like this ever happens again. After the officer left, I sat in the car for a long time, trying to process everything. Max had fallen back asleep, and Ellie was humming softly to herself, her bunny pressed against her cheek. They looked so peaceful, so innocent, and it only made me angrier about what had happened. I couldn't get my mom's face out of my head. The calm, matter-of-fact way she had justified her actions, like she genuinely believed she was doing the right thing. And worse, the lies she had told to make it all seem acceptable. I wanted to scream at her, to make her understand the damage she had caused. But I also couldn't ignore the years of love and support she'd given me. She'd been there for me through the worst moments of my life. My divorce, my struggles as a single mom, the nights when I felt like I couldn't keep going. Did this one catastrophic mistake undo all of that? When I finally got home, I put the kids to bed, lingering in their room longer than usual. I sat on the edge of Max's bed, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead as he slept. Ellie had finally let go of her bunny, her tiny fingers twitching as she dreamed. I thought about what the officer had said about filing a report. I knew he was right. It was the smart thing to do, the responsible thing. But the thought of turning my mom into a villain, of dragging her into the same legal system I'd used to protect my kids from my ex, made my stomach turn. I didn't know what to do. The next morning, I woke up to a text from my mom. Can we talk? I'm so sorry. Please, just let me explain. I stared at the screen for a long time before replying. We'll talk, but not today. I wasn't ready. Not yet. My anger was still too raw, my trust too shattered. I needed time to figure out what this meant for our relationship and what boundaries I needed to set to make sure this never happened again. As I set the phone down, I looked over at the kids, who were still sleeping soundly. They were safe now, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I let myself exhale. But I knew this wasn't over. Not with my mom, and not with the pieces of my life that had been shaken loose by her betrayal. There was still so much I needed to figure out, so many decisions I had to make. And deep down, I couldn't shake the fear that this was only the beginning. By the time I got home, the kids were finally settled. Max fell asleep almost immediately, his little body curling into the blankets as though nothing in the world had gone wrong. Ellie clung to her bunny, blinking up at me with tired eyes before drifting off. It wasn't until I saw them both breathing softly, safe in their beds, that I allowed myself to sit down and really feel the weight of everything that had happened. I sat on the couch with my phone in my hand, staring at my mom's name in my contacts. I didn't want to call her. The thought of hearing her voice, so familiar, yet now so tainted by what she'd done, filled me with a mix of dread and anger. But I couldn't ignore her. I needed answers. I needed to understand how she could have done something so reckless, so unforgivable. I dialed her number before I could change my mind. She picked up on the first ring. "Hi, honey," she said, her tone almost cheerful. "I've been waiting to hear from you. Is everything okay? Did you find the kids?" The casualness of her voice sent a wave of fury through me. "Yes, I found them," I snapped, unable to keep the venom out of my voice. "They're home and safe now, no thanks to you." "Oh, thank God," she said, sounding relieved. "I've been so worried." Her words made me bristle. "Worried?" I repeated. "You're worried? Do you even realize what you've done, Mom? Do you have any idea how much danger you put them in?" There was a pause on her end, and when she spoke again, her voice was quieter but still defensive. "I don't think you're being fair," she said. "I did what I thought was best for the kids." I laughed bitterly. "Best for the kids? You handed them over to a man who isn't even supposed to be near them. A man I've spent years trying to protect them from. And you lied to him, told him I was fine with it. Do you have any idea how much damage you've caused?" Her tone shifted, becoming sharper. "He's their father," she said firmly. "He has a right to see them. You've been too hard on him, keeping them away like this. He loves them. and they deserved to have a relationship with him. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. You think I'm too hard on him? I asked, my voice trembling with disbelief. Mom, have you completely lost your mind? Do you not remember why I left him? Do you not remember all the nights I cried to you about the screaming, the threats, the way he used to treat me? Or are you just choosing to forget? Her voice softened, almost like she was talking to a child. That was a long time ago, sweetheart. People change. Maybe he's not the same person he was back then. I've seen it before. People grow up, they become better. Better? I repeated, the word tasting bitter on my tongue. Is that what you call taking my kids without permission? Violating a restraining order? Lying to both me and him? That doesn't sound like better to me, Mom. That sounds like the same man I've been trying to keep out of our lives. You're being dramatic, she said dismissively. He just wanted to spend time with them. I didn't think it would turn into this whole mess. This whole mess? I snapped. You think this is about some little misunderstanding? Mom, this isn't just about me. This is about my kids. You put them in danger because you thought you knew better than I did. And you didn't even bother to tell me. Her frustration bled through the phone now. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd overreact, she said sharply. You've been so overwhelmed lately. I thought if you spent some time with the kids, it might take some pressure off you. I was trying to help. Help, I said, my voice shaking with fury. You didn't help, Mom. You made everything worse. Do you have any idea how scared I was last night? How terrified I was that something had happened to them? Do you even care? Of course I care, she said, her voice rising to match mine. But you don't understand what it's like to see your daughter struggling, trying to do it all by herself, and knowing you can't fix it. I thought maybe he could be part of the solution instead of the problem. Part of the solution? I repeated, stunned. Mom, he's the problem. He's always been the problem. And you just handed my kids over to him, like none of that mattered. Her silence was deafening. I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm raging inside me. Mom, I said finally, my voice quieter but no less firm. I don't care what your intentions were. You crossed a line. You betrayed my trust. And I don't know if I can ever forgive you for that. I made a mistake, she said softly. I admit that, but you're acting like I'm the enemy here. I love you. I love those kids. I would never do anything to hurt them. You already did, I said flatly. Whether you meant to or not, you did. And I need you to understand that this can't happen again. Ever. If you want to be part of our lives, you're going to have to respect my boundaries. No more lies. No more going behind my back. Do you understand me? Her voice was small now, almost defeated. I understand, she said. Good, I said. Because if you ever pull something like this again, you won't get another chance. I hung up before she could say anything else, my hands trembling as I set the phone down. The conversation had left me drained, my emotions raw and frayed. The kids were still asleep, their little faces peaceful and unbothered by the chaos swirling around them. I sat on the couch, staring at nothing, trying to process everything my mom had said. She'd rewritten history, turned my pain into some justification for her actions, and refused to take full responsibility for what she'd done. I didn't know what our relationship would look like moving forward. I didn't even know if it was worth salvaging. But one thing was clear. I couldn't trust her anymore. And that hurt almost as much as what she'd done. I closed my eyes, leaning back against the cushions as exhaustion finally began to take hold. For now, the kids were safe, and that was all that mattered. But the road ahead felt long and uncertain, and I wasn't sure how I was going to navigate it. In the days that followed, the betrayal wrapped itself around me like a heavy cloak. Every moment of quiet seemed to invite my mind to replay the events over and over again. I'd think about the lies my mom told, the way she handed over my kids without a second thought, and the hollow excuses she tried to offer afterward. My mom, the one person I thought I could trust more than anyone, had shattered that trust into 1,000 pieces. I tried to focus on the kids, keeping things as normal as possible for their sake. We did puzzles together, baked cookies, and went to the park like nothing had happened. But the truth lingered in the back of my mind. They'd been through something they didn't fully understand, and it was my job to make sure they were okay. At night, when they were asleep and the house was quiet, I'd sit alone on the couch, scrolling mindlessly through my phone or staring at the ceiling. The weight of it all felt unbearable at times. My mom had always been my anchor, my rock. She'd been there through every major life event, the good, the bad, and the catastrophic. When my ex and I split, she was the first person I called. When I felt like I was drowning under the pressures of single parenting, she was the one who swooped in to help. Now, though, she felt like a stranger, someone I couldn't trust, someone I couldn't lean on anymore. I wasn't sure if that gap could ever be bridged. When I told a few close friends and family members what had happened, the reactions were mixed. My best friend, Sarah, was horrified. She what? Sarah nearly yelled over the phone. Are you serious? She gave the kids to your ex? After everything he's done? Yeah, I said, rubbing my temples as I paced the living room. She said she thought she was helping, that they needed a relationship with him, or whatever. That's insane, Sarah said. I'm sorry, but she put your kids in danger. That's not something you just sweep under the rug. She's my mom, I said, my voice faltering. It's not that simple. Maybe it should be, Sarah said firmly. Good intentions or not, she crossed a line. If it were me, I don't think I could forgive her. Others, though, were more forgiving. My cousin Lisa tried to play devil's advocate. I mean, it sounds like she just didn't realize how serious it was, Lisa said when we talked. I'm not saying what she did was right, but it sounds like she was coming from a place of love. Love? I snapped, unable to hide the bitterness in my voice. She lied to me and to him. She put my kids in the hands of someone I've been trying to protect them from for years. That's not love. That's recklessness. Lisa sighed. You're right, she said softly. But she's your mom. People make mistakes. Maybe she deserves a chance to make it right. I didn't know how to respond to that. I wasn't sure if I agreed. One thing was clear. I couldn't handle this alone. I started looking into therapy, not just for me, but for the kids, too. I didn't know how much of what happened had sunk into their little minds, but I wanted to make sure they were okay. I found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and made an appointment for myself first. When I sat in the office, explaining the events of the past week to a stranger, I felt a strange mix of relief and shame. Saying it all out loud made it feel even more real, but it also lifted some of the weight off my chest. You've been through a lot, the therapist said gently when I finished. It's understandable that you're feeling betrayed and unsure about how to move forward. It's going to take time to process this, and that's okay. I don't know what to do about my mom, I admitted, twisting my hands in my lap. She's always been such a big part of our lives, but now, I don't even know if I can trust her. And the thought of cutting her out completely, I can't imagine it. You don't have to make any big decisions right now, she said. But setting boundaries is going to be important. If she wants to be part of your lives, she'll need to respect those boundaries. It's okay to take your time figuring out what that looks like. I left the session feeling a little lighter, but still unsure. I started making plans for the kids to meet with the therapist, too, hoping it would help them process anything they might be feeling. Ellie had been clinging to me more than usual, and Max had asked a few vague questions about their dad that made my stomach twist. I knew we had a long road ahead, but at least we were taking the first steps. As for my mom, I still hadn't spoken to her again since our heated phone call. She texted me a few more times, apologizing and asking if we could talk, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. Every time I thought about her, the anger bubbled up all over again. I knew I couldn't avoid her forever. At some point, I'd have to decide whether to try to rebuild our relationship or let it crumble completely. But for now, I needed space. I needed to focus on myself and my kids and figure out how to pick up the pieces of the life she had shattered. Trust, once broken, is almost impossible to rebuild. And as much as I wanted to believe that my mom could fix this, part of me couldn't shake the feeling that things would never be the same again. After days of wrestling with my thoughts, I decided it was time to confront my mom in person. I couldn't keep avoiding her forever, but I also couldn't pretend like nothing had happened. I needed to set boundaries, and I needed her to understand, once and for all, that her actions were unacceptable. I called her and asked if she could come over to talk. She sounded almost relieved when she agreed, like she'd been waiting for me to make the first move. Of course, honey, she said, her tone soft and sweet. We'll get everything straightened out. When she arrived, I was sitting at the kitchen table, the same place we'd shared so many cups of coffee and heart-to-hearts over the years. But this time, there was no warmth, no comfort. Just a tension so thick it felt like the walls themselves were holding their breath. She sat down across from me, her smile tentative. I'm glad you called, she began, folding her hands in her lap. I've been so worried about you and the kids. I just want us to move past this. I didn't return her smile. Mom, we need to talk about what happened. Really talk about it. Her expression faltered, and she sighed. I know you're upset. Upset doesn't even begin to cover it. I interrupted, my voice firm but calm. You went behind my back, handed my kids over to someone I've been trying to protect them from, and then lied to me about it. That's not something we can just move past. I made a mistake, she said quickly, her voice defensive. But I was trying to help, and you know it. You've been so stressed lately, and I thought. Stop, I said, cutting her off. I don't care what you thought. You didn't have the right to make that decision. You didn't have the right to put my kids in danger. Her face flushed, and she shifted in her seat. Danger, she repeated, incredulous. He's their father. He loves them. You're acting like he's some kind of monster. I leaned forward, my hands gripping the edge of the table. Do you honestly not remember why I left him? Do you not remember the screaming, the threats, the way he used to treat me? I told you everything, Mom. You saw the bruises. You sat with me when I filed the restraining order. And now you're sitting here, defending him? She looked away, her lips pressing into a thin line. That was a long time ago, she said quietly. People change. I stared at her, my chest tightening. Maybe some people do, I said. But he hasn't. He took the kids without my permission, violated a court order, and lied to my face. Does that sound like someone who's changed to you? She didn't answer right away, but when she finally spoke, her tone was sharp. You're being too hard on him. And on me. I was just trying to do what was best for the kids. They deserve to have a relationship with their father. Not at the cost of their safety, I shot back. And definitely not at the cost of my trust. She shook her head, her frustration bubbling to the surface. You're overreacting, she said, her voice rising slightly. I know I made a mistake, but you're acting like I put them in some kind of life or death situation. He's their father. He has a right to see them. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. All right? I repeated, my voice shaking with anger. He lost that right when he became a threat to me and the kids. And you knew that. You knew. And you still went behind my back and handed them over to him, like it was nothing. She rolled her eyes, a dismissive gesture that felt like a slap in the face. You're being so dramatic, she muttered. That was the moment I knew I couldn't keep giving her the benefit of the doubt. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. Here's the deal, Mom, I said, my voice cold and unwavering. If you want to be part of our lives, things are going to change. You're going to respect my boundaries, my decisions as their mother, and the rules I set for their safety. No more going behind my back. No more lies. Do you understand? She bristled, her jaw tightening. You're really going to hold this over my head? She asked, her tone laced with resentment. After everything I've done for you? This isn't about the past, I said firmly. This is about what you did. And if you can't respect me or my boundaries, then you won't be seeing the kids. End of story. Her eyes widened, and for a moment, I thought she might apologize. But instead, she folded her arms and stared at me coldly. I can't believe you'd do this to me, she said, her voice low. After all the sacrifices I've made for you, this is how you repay me? I stared at her, feeling a strange mix of sadness and resolve. I'm not doing this to hurt you, Mom, I said quietly. I'm doing this to protect my kids. Because they come first. Always. The silence that followed was deafening. She didn't argue, didn't try to defend herself further. She just sat there, staring at me with a look that was equal parts hurt and anger. Finally, she stood up, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. I guess I should go, she said stiffly. I didn't stop her. Closed behind her. I felt a strange sense of relief mixed with a deep ache in my chest. Setting boundaries with someone you love is never easy, but it was necessary. I knew I'd done the right thing for my kids. But as I sat there in the quiet, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd lost something I might never get back. It's been months since that night, and while life has settled into something resembling normalcy, the ripples of what happened still linger. I wish I could say everything has been resolved, but it hasn't. Some days, it feels like I'm still picking up the pieces of my trust, my boundaries, and my sense of stability. My mom hasn't reached out much since our confrontation. The few times she did, it was through text with short, polite messages asking how the kids were or offering to drop off something she thought they might need. I never responded with more than a polite thanks or we're fine. I could tell she was trying, in her way, but it wasn't enough to erase the damage she'd caused. Honestly, I'm okay with the distance. For the first time in a long time, I feel like I have control over who gets to be in my life and my children's lives. My kids are safe, and that's what matters most. Everything else, my relationship with my mom, my lingering anger, the emotional scars left behind, can wait. I've learned a lot about trust through all of this. For years, I thought trust was automatic, something that came with love or shared history. But now, I realize that trust is earned and fragile. It doesn't matter if someone is family. Being family doesn't give you a free pass to undermine someone's decisions or put their children in harm's way. That lesson was a hard one to learn, but it's made me stronger. I've set boundaries, not just with my mom, but with everyone in my life. It hasn't been easy, but it's been necessary. Take my ex, for example. Since the incident, I've had to reestablish every legal measure to ensure he stays away. My lawyer helped me update the restraining order, adding explicit clauses about contact with the kids. I've also made it clear to the daycare and school that under no circumstances is he allowed to pick them up. Every precaution feels like a layer of armor, one I wish I didn't need but know I can't live without. The kids are doing better than I expected. At first, I was terrified that the ordeal would leave lasting scars on them, especially Ellie. For weeks, she wouldn't let her bunny out of her sight, and Max kept asking vague but pointed questions about their dad. "Why doesn't he live with us?" he asked one night as I tucked him into bed. "Did we do something wrong?" The question broke my heart, but I answered him honestly. Well, as honestly as a child his age could handle. "No, sweetheart," I said, brushing his hair away from his forehead. "You didn't do anything wrong. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that aren't good for their families, and it's my job to keep you and Ellie safe. That's why we live the way we do." He seemed to accept that, at least for now. Ellie, being younger, hasn't asked much, but she's been more clingy than usual, always wanting to be near me, her tiny hand reaching for mine whenever we're out. I've been giving her the extra comfort she needs, reminding her in little ways that I'm here and that she's safe. Therapy has been a godsend. Both kids have been meeting with a child therapist, and it's given me peace of mind knowing they have a safe space to process everything. I've also been seeing someone regularly, talking through my anger, my guilt, and the complicated feelings I still have about my mom. Speaking of my mom, I wish I could say I've figured out what to do about her, but the truth is I haven't. There are days when I think about reaching out, trying to mend the broken pieces of our relationship. But then I remember the way she dismissed the restraining order, the way she rolled her eyes when I told her how dangerous my ex was. It's not about punishment. It's about trust. And the simple fact is, I don't trust her anymore. I've talked to my therapist about it endlessly, trying to navigate the line between forgiveness and self-preservation. "You can forgive someone without giving them access to your life," she said during one session. "Forgiveness is about you, not them. It's about letting go of the anger, so it doesn't consume you." I'm working on that. Letting go of the anger. It's a slow process, but I'm getting there. Every day, I'm rebuilding my sense of security, brick by brick. I've made changes around the house. Extra locks on the doors, a new security system, even a camera at the front door. I used to feel silly about those things like they were overkill. Not anymore. I've also tightened my circle of trust. The people who are in my life now are there because they've proven they deserve to be. And the ones who've betrayed that trust, well, they're on the outside looking in. It hasn't been easy, but I'm proud of the progress I've made. My kids are thriving. I'm healing. And I know one thing for sure. No one, not even my own mother, will ever jeopardize my family's safety again. This chapter of my life has been painful, but it's also been a lesson in strength and resilience. I'm not the same person I was before this happened. I'm stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever to protect what matters most. Because at the end of the day, my kids come first. Always. And nothing, no betrayal, no heartbreak, no lingering doubts will ever change that.